with no further ado, really excited about this guest. Been trying to get him on for a couple weeks, and we got him, and I'm excited. And it's right before the start of training camp, so I'm sure he's fresh as a daisy. This is the Detroit Lions general manager, Mr. Brad Holmes. Brad, what's up, man?
How you doing, man? It's good. Thanks for having me. Glad we're able to finally get this together, man. I hope you didn't think I was ducking you,
No, you know what? It's funny because this is like the off season, but it's also the only time that people can get away. So it's yes, I'd love
It
to do your
is.
podcast, but I also have a family I'd like to see.
Yeah, no, it's and really like during the season, because I know we started talking about during the season, and the season's probably the most like normalized, regimented part of the whole year because you kind of know what's gonna happen, but when the season ends, that's when it gets like crazy,
Yeah.
crazy. And then we do quite a bit after the draft, preparing for the upcoming year. So, but fresh off vacation, got a good little week at home, and it's a great time, man.
I think that's a good segue. So take us through, and you are a general manager. What is the schedule? Because I think most people think, all right, draft, and then kick your feet up, and then free agency, but it's really year round.
Yeah, it really is, man. Like I said, you have training camp and you go through that, and a lot of roster reduction stuff, but after training camp, I say the season. Everybody thinks like the season's like that's the biggest part because it's the football season. But from a GM standpoint, it's actually probably the most regimented part because you pretty much know, okay, you got game day. Game day is going to bring all your stress and emotions, and but after game day, Mondays you're dealing with
Hmm.
injuries and medical stuff, and then Tuesdays you're dealing with roster management and getting all your moves done, and then the week starts, and actually we actually kind of devote a lot of that time for draft prep actually, so because you kind of have the time,
Yeah.
and then you kind of just operate normally. But then after the season ends, and that's when you're like full throttle, like you're heading straight into you're balancing free agency and draft at the same
Mm.
time, and then you're going all the way up to free agency. So that's probably the most hectic time is pre-free agency because you're kind of doing both. And then once free agency kind of like that second or third wave kind of hits, you can start dialing more so towards straight draft. And then, it's kind of just full throttle through the draft.
Because we're heading into the 2023 season and we're still just a couple months removed. I want to go back to that first round for you guys and the Detroit Lions. We're going to get into your story in a second, but I feel like just the excitement about the Lions is real. And you've read all the headlines, I'm sure, or you've blocked as many headlines as you can out about how this is like the hot team in the NFC. But the draft, right in the days leading up to the draft, I had a couple birdies in my ear being like, I think Jahmyr Gibbs might go earlier than the mock drafts are saying, and another one saying he might go before Bijan Robinson. Sure enough, you guys, you get him early, top 15, and everyone around like, oh, what a shock. But like people that I was talking to say that's not such a shock. That's about where he was slated. When did you fall in love with Jahmyr Gibbs, and what did you love about him?
Man, it's funny that you said you heard that about him going that early because I was sitting here thinking, I was like, nobody's going to do this except us. And then after we picked him, then I heard all these other general
Oh yeah,
managers.
yeah, no, that's who we
I was
wanted. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right. I'm glad you picked him there because he wasn't going to make it. But no, I first fell in love with him. Obviously, I didn't know about him that much when he was at Georgia Tech that year
Yeah.
before. So I went to that Texas Alabama game or earlier in the year, and I kind of got tipped off about him like right at the game, right before the start of the game, and I was like, okay. And I saw his body type, and like, man, this guy looked intriguing. Then I kind of saw what he was doing in both phases. Yeah, I mean, he can run it, but what he was doing as a receiver and the explosiveness and everything about him, and we just kept doing work on him. And like I said, kind of do some draft prep during the season and kept doing work on him. And that was just kind of it for me. I was like, this guy's and he's a weapon. He's a weapon, and when you talk about all the running backs going in the first round and all that kind of stuff, I always say like, if he's a weapon, then forget the RB
Positionless
position.
players,
That's in
right?
like
Like that's how it looks like.
that's what he is. Like that's what like we thought he was a multi-phase, elite, explosive, positionless weapon, and he was a special player. You have the combine to confirm some things, but he ran what I thought he was going to run, and all the testing and his workouts, and we're just really excited about him. I think he's gonna bring another dimension to our offense. That's as good as we were offensively last year. I think it's gonna be even better this year. But bottom line, this is you just got to get the guys that you want, and I kind of look at, especially this past draft. Everybody was saying like this is a different draft.
Yeah.
This is a different draft. Well, let's call it what it is. It just wasn't as strong of a draft as it normally has been in
And
the
by that you
past. So
mean
like
blue chip guys,
usually
top
you have,
20. Yeah.
yeah, like in a normal year, you'll have like true first round talent players.
Hmm.
You might have about 17 or 18 guys. I really haven't seen any higher than 20 in all the years that I've been doing it. We ended up with 14 guys, and that was at the very end. Like it was less than that at one point.
Yeah.
Like at one point, we had like 9 or 10, and so it was just one of those guys. But Jahmyr was always one of those guys. So I just looked at it as like, damn, look, let's just get the who the hell we want, and let's get the hell out of there,
Right.
and let's like one of my favorite movies is Training Day.
Yeah.
Um, it was like me and my dad's me and my dad's favorite movie, and there was a scene in Training Day where have you seen the movie?
Yes, Ethan Hawke, and of
Yeah,
course, yeah.
yeah. So like it was one of those scenes where he goes into this the rough area, and he goes to his lady's house and takes his money, and then he goes out, and him and Ethan Hawke are trying to get out of the neighborhood, and the girl comes out there and rats him out and says, "Hey, this guy just took our money." And Denzel's just in this shootout, and he's just shooting out, trying to get out of the neighborhood, and he's basically shooting his way out of there. And I was like, that draft was kind of
Just
that.
get me
It's
out
just
of here.
like,
I want my players.
just
We got it.
get who we want, and just shoot our way out of here and get on out of there. And we were just ecstatic about how the whole thing went down.
Would you say that you and Dan Campbell are Jake Hoyt and Alonzo Harris in that film? Would you put? Is that?
I don't, I don't want to have that image
Yeah.
quite yet, but I will say we work as a pair very, very well. We partner very, very well. Again, I know a lot of people know now that we didn't really know each other
Yeah.
that much before we got hired, but I always give so much credit to Sheila and Rod Wood and Chris Spielman and Mike Disney, everybody that was involved in that interview process of that. I guess that they just knew that we would pair so well, and he's a joy to work with.
Yeah.
Really is, and he's a hell of a coach.
He's cool, and he's got a great personality, and those players really rallied around him, especially in the second half of the season. You look at that running
Yeah.
backs room. Obviously, it's Gibbs, and now it's Montgomery. Last year, you had something fun with Williams and Swift.
Yeah.
Everyone might say the value of the position's devalued, and whatever you want to say about it. That's a pretty big change for the running backs room, considering you guys were so red hot at the end of the season. You feel good about where you guys are at with that position group?
Yeah, I mean, overall, when you look at it just systematically, I do think that we'll be better offensively, and that's no knock on the contributions that those other two guys gave us because they Swift is a dynamic player, and Jamal, he was a great leader for us, and he did so much for us. He had a great season.
He's awesome. I think he had 18 touchdowns.
But we do think that Montgomery, I think Montgomery and Jamal are different backs. Montgomery does a little bit more in the passing game, and being able to add Gibbs, I think he's so dynamic as a receiver. And look, he's a home run hitter as a running back. I mean, that's the easy part, but what he does as a receiver, I mean, he runs routes like a receiver.
Is that right? Because you get all this Alabama talent, and then here's another one, and it's like, no, this one's special and has his own skill set that maybe because he was only there 1 year didn't get the same hype as the other guys.
Yeah, he was just different. And going through that process, I was like, man, how many guys have I seen that was like equally as effective. Like when I first got with the Rams in 2003, Marshall Falk was still
Mm.
there, and I was a huge Marshall Falk guy, just coming in, and so just kind of seeing what he did in both phases, and then just from a scouting standpoint, when Christian McCaffrey came out, he was like the last guy. I was like, holy cow!
Yeah.
Like this guy can run routes like a slot receiver, but also run it, and so you start getting, kind of reminders of, some of those players. I'm not sitting here saying
No,
that
I know.
Jahmyr Gibbs is those players, but, just a special weapon like that. Just, we have a lot of excitement, optimism.
Yeah, and I think the offensive coordinator story is pretty cool too. Had opportunities to interview for other head coaching jobs and kind of withdrew his name and said, "I'm good here in Detroit with this group." Take us through that decision from Ben Johnson and what that meant in the organization as a whole.
Man, that was huge. And look, at the end of the day, look, it's hard to keep the good ones.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually the cat gets out the bag, and there's just no hiding. But Ben, you saw it right out the gate. Even when he was a tight ends coach, and obviously Dan, had prior experience with him, but when things got rough in that 21 season, and we had to make that change from Anthony Lynn, and, Ben basically became the passing game coordinator, basically, but Dan was calling plays, and Dan's never called plays before, and Dan was just doing a great job and just having fun with it, but Ben just added this other element. Was just like, wow, this dude's creative.
Like hooking
He can
ladders
take
on week
command of the
18
room.
in Green Bay. Awesome.
But that's another component of when you asked me the question about the running backs, and I said I think we'll be better offensively this year, as good as we were last year. Is just that Ben going into his second year as the
Mm-hmm.
OC, like I think last year he showed everybody like I can do this, like I'm legit. But going, having the experience under his belt, going into year two, having Jared with him going into year two, and then all the other components that we added in free agency in the draft. That's why I feel better about willing to be better
Real
offensively.
quick, a couple more things, Lions related, then we're going to get more into your story. The Jack Campbell pick, that was one where if Gibbs was like, okay, Campbell, that left people slack jawed and just being like, wait, what? Not
Yeah.
a first round mock draft guy whatsoever, and yet I saw Jack Campbell. I turned to my co-host on NFL Network. I'm like, well, that's Chris Spielman just walking through the door again. That's what I think. Who, of course, works in your organization and has a great role. But a linebacker, another position not considered necessarily the same as pass rusher, offensive tackle, or quarterback in this league. And yet you liked him, you took him, and away we go.
Yeah, I mean, I think with these, I think sometimes it's almost like the draft's not that easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like the draft is not, oh, you take these positions and these players that play these positions, put them up top because they got stats and they've been on the internet and put them up top. And then these players that play these positions, put them at the bottom. And that's it. And just work on it for a couple of months. And
Daniel Jeremiah says
not,
this. Mel Kiper says this. Take him there.
Like, come on, like, give it a little bit more credit. The draft's not that easy. And he's the one, look, when you're talking about building a defense, and me and Aaron Glenn have very similar philosophies in terms of, like, what does it take to really elevate your defense? And you better have guys up front. You better have guys that can cover. So, often the inside linebacker or the off-ball linebacker. Like we took Malcolm Rodriguez the year before in the sixth round, and he had a great year. And he's going to be someone that's going to be contributing for us going forward. But it was just that you got to look at the player, like not the position. We don't draft positions; we draft players. And so when you looked at the player of Jack Campbell, and we saw it as like, no, we're not drafting an inside linebacker. We actually went into after we signed Alex Anzalone, and we feel really good about the direction that Derek Barnes and Malcolm Rodriguez was heading. It's not like inside linebacker was like, oh, you better
Some
get
great
inside
need,
linebacker.
like we need it, yeah.
Like it's not. It's like no, but Jack Campbell was just a hell of a football player, and I just think that like we're looking at it as he's going to be an anchor in our defense, not we're drafting an inside linebacker. Like no, we're just taking an anchor that's going to be our defense. And when you talk about guys, when you look at free agency, you look at inside linebackers, you know, you might have this whole list, but then when you're looking at guys that can actually wear that green dot and really run the show, that list shrinks down like this.
Yeah.
Like it goes from this and it goes to this. And so then when you have a guy like Jack Campbell that's 6'5", 250, that's extremely instinctive. He's heavy in the run game. He's extremely smart, and I just love how the kid is wired. I mean, he's wired to fit what we're all about. You know, we're all about grit, doing it the right way, like the truly earning it. And this guy just loves football. He's all business, and so it's about the player. It's not about this guy plays inside linebacker. This guy plays running back. No, like go to Jahmyr Gibbs. It's like, oh, the guy plays. No, he's a weapon, but Jahmyr Gibbs is really smart.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, oh yeah, he can align all these different places. You got to be smart to align all these different places. You don't just align all these different places. No, like you got to be really smart. You got to be really heady and instinctive, and so I thought Jack Campbell, you know, had all the traits that we look for in a football player. And so that's how we felt really good about it. And again, going back to what I was saying about it wasn't but a certain amount of players that we had in that first round bucket. And he was one of them. And when I say it was only 14 guys, Jack Campbell wasn't 14. You know what I mean? So like that's why it was easy.
I love it. You guys have your board. You have your guys, and hey, if we can get this guy at 18 and he was a top 14 player of ours, maybe even higher, top 10, we're taking him.
Yeah.
Mock drafts be damned.
That's kind of what that's our stance. We're just we do a lot of work. We're very thorough, and I know I think every team is going to say that, but we just have a lot of conviction in our process and what we believe, and we just stick by it, and that's what we did.
I love it. And last year, you not only had Hutchinson step up, but you had so many rookies playing big roles, especially on that defense, that it's hard not to say, okay, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and let's see before everyone starts giving them, you know, B's and C's on their draft grades based on what the mock draft said.
Yeah, and I mean that's. I always say, like, it's such a psychological component of, like, the mock drafts. And, look, I'm not – look.
You get it.
Look, I know you – like, I know you do mock
drafts.
But,
take a lot of pride in it.
But I'll say this. I mean, Schrager, you do football every single day. Like, that's what you do all the time. You know a lot of people. I look at, like, so I'm not going to say, like, I don't look at mock drafts. Yeah, I look at them because people talk and people do the research and all that, but you just still have to have ultimate belief and ultimate conviction in your own process. But no, there's plenty of guys that do them that I respect, and I'm like, man, I know this guy knows people. You know, he's done a lot of work, you know, and I think he puts a lot of pride, but when it doesn't go down the way you projected it, your brain doesn't really like that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of
you want to be right. You want to be right.
Everybody wants to be right. And so then now you're mad, and now you're like, damn it, no one said he was going to go that high, and then now you got to sign a grade while you're still mad. So now it's like, oh, no one said he's going to go there. No, and I'm just like, and I was like, at the end of the day, I'm like,
we've liked Jack Campbell since March. You know,
because really the only rankings that really matters is the 31 other general managers, and those are the rankings that nobody has, and that's what makes the draft so fun. And so when I see people get mad about it didn't go the way, I'm like, look, you should embrace the excitement of that. Like that's the fun part of the draft. You don't know how it's going to fall, and you see a name that goes on, you be like, whoa, I didn't know that. It's like, embrace that.
It is the ultimate
getting mad.
It's the ultimate reality show. It's more than the season even, because it's so rapid fire. And I say it before the draft. I beg my colleagues on Twitter, on ESPN, don't tip the picks. It is such a fun experience as a viewer. If you don't look at it, and you guys in the war rooms and trying to manipulate the chessboard, it's war games, and it's fun to watch from outside, but I'm sure it's stressful as hell in your chair.
It is. But it is, you're right. It's fun. And what I was telling a lot of people after the draft, you know, I was like, okay, this was the draft. This was the draft season. This was, you know, the build-up. And then when it's over, then it's over. And then now the OTA start, and guys start getting on the field, and now that's the thing. And then now training camp is about to start, so that'll be a thing. So it's like it goes in phases where it's just like I was telling you about the movie, with Ethan Hawke
Yeah.
and Denzel Washington. It's like you do the shootout and the back window shot out, and the cars kind of shot up a little bit, but they got out,
We got out. The
and
show
so
goes
it's like
on.
you gotta take the D's and F's of the mock drafters and all that. And it's okay, all right,
Yeah.
that's fine. It'll be back to normal.
I love your story. I think it's a story of perseverance, but also you've had a great career. Can we go
Thank
back
you.
to your high school days? You were a star player in Tampa, Florida. You were, I want to say, homecoming king. Is that true? I did my research.
Yeah,
Homecoming
yeah, that's
king,
right.
captain of the football team. You go to North Carolina A&T, and you're having a
Yeah.
great freshman sophomore year, and then a major life moment occurred. I'm gonna say something, and then you take us back and explain what happened. But I'm just gonna say the Music City Miracle game, and then take us backwards and lead up to what that game means in your life.
Oh man. So yeah. I'm at home visiting. My parents down in Tampa, and have a near fatal car accident. Just get sidelined, and I'm in ICU for a week, and it was. I mean, I'm very blessed and lucky to pull through that, but yeah, I was in ICU in St. Joseph Hospital in Tampa, Florida, watching the Music City Miracle, and I never forget. And then when I got released from the hospital, I'm watching the '99 Rams, go to their Super Bowl run when they played the Bucks, in that NFC Championship game, and it was. I mean, I was watching that just couch ridden when I got released, but those moments kind of really resonate with me because you don't take anything for granted, and what that taught me is that look, if you have something that you believe, always believe it, and don't let anybody take your dreams away. Because I never forget that my college coach Bill Hayes visited me in the hospital, um, and he sees one of his players in a ICU bed mangled up, and I'm sitting there telling him that I'm going to play again, and he's like, "Yeah, all right, yeah, right. I mean, like you're lucky if you were walking." I was like, "No, I'm going to play again." And sure enough, it just gave me time to get as healthy as I could, rehab, and was able to, join the team. I had missed that whole
Yeah.
spring, and I joined the team during summer workouts. And a big part of my rehab process was my grandfather coming down, and my grandfather played golf twice a day, and just driving his cart and
Really?
kind of just, or yeah, like just getting used to even driving again, stuff like that. You go through all this occupational therapy and all that, but to be able to join my teammates that summer, and I felt actually stronger than I ever was. I felt even better in shape, and and we went on and was able to finish my career at North Carolina A&T. But that's definitely the biggest adversity that I've ever overcome in my life, and something that I'll never forget, and it sticks with me.
You went into a coma. You had a stroke, and then what was it? How many weeks or months in the hospital were you? And
Yeah, so I was in ICU for almost 2 weeks. It was like 10 days in ICU, and then I had another almost close to another week when I got released and moved from ICU. But yeah, had a coma, stroke, was paralyzed all the way on my right side, and I still to this day, I still have like I still don't feel like I have the exact same amount of strength, like in my right arm as my left, or it's just it's certain things that kind of just give you some reminders of that moment. But having kids now, being a parent, I just can't even think of my parents getting that call from one of my closest friends, Gabe Galgos, who I just saw back when I was on vacation. That he's the one that had to make that call to my parents of what happened, and it was I just can't even fathom getting that call one day just out of the blue, and I just have so much respect for my family, my closest friends, and I just kind of it's just one of those moments that lives with you in really a good way,
I was gonna say,
and
is
it
it
just
almost in
gives
a
you.
weird way? And they say this about survivors of traumatic events, but also survivors of illnesses. It's almost liberating, where you're like, wait, I've been through that. I can do anything now.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not a good moment because it's life threatening, but at the same time, it's one of those moments that shaped me for sure. And those are one of those things that I think kind of started my journey. Like I felt like I was always a hard worker. Always felt like I always had that mindset of just kind of overcoming the odds. My father had taught me that a long time ago. He played in the NFL for a short while, and I never forget he bought me a weight set, when I was in like the seventh grade, and he was like, no, it was in the eighth grade, I think it was in eighth or ninth grade, but he bought me a weight set, and I never forget he told me he was like, Brad, it's not about what other people are seeing you doing. It's about what you're doing and about what you're doing when other people aren't watching
Yeah.
and about how hard you're working. And so I always felt like I was a hard worker, but going through that car accident and going through that process, getting back on my feet and not only having a chance to play football, but having a chance at life again. I'm just forever grateful and fortunate. But I do think that did kind of spark that fuel of getting to where I got to now because I had to take a really long road. It was a very unconventional path in terms of getting started and just being told no when I first tried to get into business and just keep fighting at it. And I think it bode well for me.
It's an amazing story, and I think what you're alluding to with your career, like I was looking in your bio, you were an Atlanta Hawks public relations, entry level guy doing
Yeah,
PR for the Atlanta Hawks coming out of school for you, and then you were at the St. Louis Rams doing
yeah,
PR, which is
yeah.
setting up interviews, which is working on messaging for the team, which is helping the players, talk to the media and arrange that kind of. How do you make that jump from PR to being an NFL GM 20 years later?
Yeah, so my degree was in PR, and credit to my mother's been in the education field forever, and like halfway through college, I started off as a business and marketing major. I didn't even know why. I just thought that was a cool major to be in, and then my mom was like, "Brad, you might want to change that, dude. Like, you're more of a verbal writing person. You're not a math." I was like, all right. So I changed my degree to PR, and it was the best thing for me. And I really like my grade just started to change. But anyways, when I got done playing, I knew I wanted to get in the NFL and try to get into scouting. And I sent my resume to all the teams like everybody else does. And my dad had a couple of
Yeah.
connections, but none of that fell through. So my mom was basically like, dude, you got to come back home. You just got to come home and just figure it out. And so I moved back home and I was renting cars for Enterprise Rental
Is that
Car.
right?
And yeah, I was renting cars for Enterprise Rental Car. And, I'm wearing the shirt and tie, washing cars and renting cars. And all I'm doing is I'm thinking about sports. And that was a very psychological and emotional period of my life because that was the first time that I was not getting ready to play football. I wasn't like I'm going
Yeah.
through. It's like in July and
July and August,
August, and
and
I'm
you
like,
don't have a training
holy
camp awaiting you.
cow!
Yeah.
I don't have a training camp waiting for me. I'm not involved in football, so I'm in that little branch at Enterprise Running Car, just thinking about football all day and just thinking about sports. And so finally, an opportunity came about with the Atlanta Hawks for a media relations trainee, and so I talked to my mom about it, and my mom was like, "Look, at least you'll be back in
Yeah.
sports." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right." And so I got that opportunity with the Atlanta Hawks, and because like I could only work 40 hours a week with the Atlanta Hawks, it was a media relations trainee position. But because of my experience with Enterprise allowed me to work part time at the Atlanta
Oh
airport.
my.
So one of the greatest perks that the Atlanta Hawks gave me was a free MARTA card
Yeah.
because I didn't have the money to
Yeah, you take
live
the
in
MARTA back and
Buckhead or
forth. You can do
downtown.
both.
So
Yeah.
I lived way up in Norcross and just had this little one bedroom apartment, and so I would take the
So you're at
MARTA
Hartsfield
down.
Airport. You're taking the MARTA to
Yeah,
Phillips Arena.
so I had to start up top at the furthest northern
Oh my!
station.
I
I
went
think
to
it's the
school in
Dorville
Atlanta
station.
in the early 2000s. I
Yeah,
know
so
MARTA,
you know about it. You
and that's not
know. Yeah.
a. All respect to the MARTA folks, that ain't the New York City subway system.
So you literally had to take the Dorville station, the northernmost stop, and go down, and then drop me off downtown at the CNN
Yeah.
Center building, and that's when I would do my media relations trainee job, and then when I got off, then that's when I would go down to I'd get off and I'd take the MARTA down to the Atlanta airport,
Gosh,
and then I go to the Atlanta airport and I would just
work a full day.
rent cars. So probably about 11 o'clock at night, and then
Dang.
the Atlanta airport's the last stop. So I'd have to take that Atlanta airport MARTA all the way back up to that Dorville station up north, and that's really
Dude, what's
kind
the
of
lesson? What's the
my whole
lesson for
time in Atlanta.
what's the lesson for kids right now who are, I say kids, college graduate? I want to get in sports. I want to be a GM. You hear that story, that could be discouraging, but it should also encourage.
It should encourage you. And again, like I said at the beginning, man, look, if you're convicted on what you want to do, don't let anybody ever tell you no. And people will tell you no, and you got to use the no's as fuel to just keep going. And you just gotta be convicted, and you just gotta know that you're not gonna have the easiest path. Yeah, I had plenty of friends from college that got these high paying jobs and all this stuff, and it was great, but I was struggling. I wasn't making. I think I was only making like $8
Yeah.
an hour as a media relations trainee, and then maybe I was making like $9 an hour renting cars. But I had enough to survive, as to pay for my apartment and pay for my bills. But the great thing about that year, though, in 2003, was that the NBA All Star
I
game.
remember it. Jordan
What
Jordan comes
was
to
that
Atlanta.
year?
I was at the
Yeah,
dunk contest
yeah.
that year just as a fan.
I actually thought it was a cool job because one of my main duties was I had to get the post game quotes for the opposing
Hell yeah.
teams. So like Jordan and everybody, they would be coming in, and I'm like in the locker room, and I'm like, holy cow, like this is Tracy McGrady,
Yep.
like holy cow, this is like I'm seeing like this is Shaquille O'Neal, like I thought it was awesome. So but the NBA All Star game comes, and then my boss at the time, Arthur Trish, he was the president of communications for basketball for the Hawks at the time. He knew I wanted to get in the NFL, and he said, "Hey, look, man, a lot of these PR directors from the NFL come to the All Star game.
Cool.
I can introduce you to some of them." And so I met Dwayne Lewis, and we just kind of did a little kind of lunch interview, and he had offered me a PR internship.
Yes.
And I was like, great. And so then I just did the PR internship for the year. And during that year, so that was starting the 2003 season. And
So you make
so,
the shift from Sharif Abdur-Rahim and Dan Dickow and Dion Glover and my man Alan Henderson, and now you're at
oh,
and where are
yeah.
you going? You move everything, you go to St. Louis for an internship?
Yeah. So I just kind of packed the U-Haul.
Darn.
I just packed the U-Haul and drove to St. Louis. And I just started
Had
there.
you ever been there
And I
before?
had a
Had you
little.
ever been to
I'd never been
Brad, this is the
really in the
lesson. How
Midwest
many of these people
before.
that we talk to are like, yeah, the opportunity, but I'm from New York. I'm not moving to, like,
No,
no, you
no.
got to go.
I think it's easier when you're single with no
Yeah.
kids a little bit. I think I was 23 years old, 22 years old at the time. So, but yeah, I just packed a U-Haul and just kind of drove to St. Louis. It's about 8-9 hour drive, I think, or something like that. And then I started my PR internship. And back then, the Rams would have training camp in Macomb, Illinois, where Western Illinois is at.
Okay.
So it's like as soon as I get there and I'm there for like maybe a week, and then I got to go to Macomb, Illinois, and start my PR internship, and it was cool. Again, I was doing interviews and with Marshall Falk and stuff like that, and I was like, this is great. But during that time, during that training camp, I see these guys that weren't players, they were just regular
Yeah.
guys, and they were helping out in practice, and I'm like, what are those? And they're like, oh, those are scouting
Oh,
assistants,
cool.
and I was like, scouting assistants. I'm like, they can like help out in practice and walkthroughs and stuff, and it's like, yeah, and I'm like, wow. So I'm like, I got to get into one of those. So I struck up a good relationship with our running backs coach at the time, Wilbert Montgomery,
Okay, former
and
Pro Bowler, right? Great player in his day.
former Eagles. Yeah, I mean, and I think Wilbert just saw that I was just a young kid fresh out of college that loved football, and we would just talk football. And then as our relationship developed, I would start helping him out with stuff. I would help him. I'd help him do his running back wristband things. I'd do that kind of stuff. And one day he just asked me, he's like, "Man, why are you in PR?
Yeah.
Like, why are you not?" And I said, "Wilbert, man, I don't know anybody. I don't. I tried to get in, but I couldn't." And so he was like, "Hey, look, man, I'm gonna talk to Charlie. Charlie Arm was our GM at the
Yeah.
time, and he said, I'm gonna talk to Charlie." And at the time, all the scouting assistants kind of had this, let's call it like a
Yeah.
nepotism kind of
Everyone
in,
knew
like,
someone.
yeah, like one's uncle was the president. Another
Yeah.
one, his dad played quarterback for the
Yeah.
GM.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another one is like his grandfather used to be the owner's partner. Like all, and I'm just like, I don't have any of that. And he was like, "Look, I never." This is Wilbur talking. Wilbur's like, "Look, Brad, I never go to Charlie about anything, so he knows if it's real,
Yeah.
it's real." So he talks to Charlie and he comes back. And one thing that I had to do as a PR internship is I had to print out the daily clips. And I had to print out the daily clips and pass them out to all the coaches' offices and the GM's office. And
So here's
so
what Bernie
after
Milklas wrote about the team this week, right? Like, is that what it is?
Jim Thomas, Bernie
Yeah.
Miklasz, like all of them. And now we get them all
Sure.
emailed and PDF'd and all that. I tell these PR interns now, I'm like, "Dude, we used to have to print these things
So
out."
you'd cut out the newspaper article, you'd put it on a piece of white paper, you paste it, then you got to go to the copy machine, make 40 copies, then you got to staple it, and this is every day.
Staple it every single day. And so now on that again, I can look at it as grunt work but I was looking at it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Like I had
I'll be the
to
best at it.
hand out some clips to Lovie Smith's office, defensive coordinator. I'm like, holy cow, it's Lovie Smith. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I was able to meet. So after Wilbur told me about that, he talked to Charlie. I had to pass them out to the general manager's office, and I gave the clips to Charlie, and Charlie said, "Hey, I talked to Wilbert, and he said you're interested, and so come meet me on Friday in my office." And so I'm like, "Holy cow! Like this is it! Like it's coming!"
Crossroads, yeah.
So I didn't know, and this is being a young kid and not knowing really how to communicate effectively and handle business, right? So I didn't tell Dwayne Lewis, our PR director, because I'm like,
I'm not giving that job up.
am I
Yeah.
supposed to? Yeah, I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like, tell him I'm about to leave. You know what I mean? So and Fridays were like a dress down day.
Yeah.
So Fridays
You
was
show up
like,
shirt and
you
tie.
wear a t-shirt. And on Friday, I'm shirt and tie.
You got the enterprise
like,
gear going?
So people are looking at me like, I just got dressed up. And so I go up there, I meet Charlie Army, and it was him and his assistant, Debbie Polliman, there. And I just had a bunch of writing samples from my time with, of everything that I wanted to show Charlie, like, I can write. Like, I can
Yeah, I
write
could write up a
reports.
scouting
Like,
report.
I have a passion for writing. I love writing. Like, I'm a grammar snob to this day.
Yeah.
Like, all my staff kind of jokes on me all the time because I'm like, man, why is there not a comma right there or something like that? But anyways, I want to show them that I can write, and so I'm in there and I'm sitting at this table with Charlie and his assistant Debbie, and then next thing you know, my PR director, Dwayne Lewis, walks into Charlie's
Oy.
office, and I'm like,
Yeah.
ugh. And Dwayne's looking at me, and he's
What
like,
the?
"What the hell did you just do?"
Yeah.
Like he's like, "Why is my PR intern in the general
Yeah.
manager's office?" And so Charlie was on the phone, and Debbie tells Dwayne, Debbie's like, "No, he's fine, he's fine, he's fine." And so then Charlie gets off the phone, and he just tells Dwayne, he goes, "Hey, look, I was talking to Brad here, and he's interested in getting to scouting. So after he's done with your internship, then he's going to be my intern, starting the draft prep process." He hadn't even told me
No,
that
that's how
yet,
you found
and
out.
I'm like, whoa, okay, great. And so then, I had to, like, "Hey, Dwayne, sorry, man, I
Yeah,
can't
quick lesson on
communicate
what an
that
org
right."
chart is, Dwayne. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
This guy takes precedence.
That's how I got started, and
Man, I
I
love
got a
this.
shot to be a scouting intern. So when the season ended, basically like January through the draft, and I was a scouting intern, and I was just you know, labeling beta tapes and, entering reports. And, you have to make profile tapes. We call them profile tapes. And you got to write the time codes from the beta tapes and all that. And every now and then, they used to watch these tapes during the draft meetings. And so every now and then, Charlie would ask one of the scouting
Yeah.
assistants, to come in and talk about the player. And so I'll never forget the first
Who was the
time
guy?
they called me in. I
Oh,
can't
come
remember
on.
who the
Give it to me.
player
I want to
was.
hear.
Gosh, I can't remember who it was. I don't want to make some
Yeah.
name up. But I probably should remember it. But I never forget. He called me in, and it's like the room is like dimly lit, and this big
Yeah.
projector screen on, and they're watching my profile tape, and it's a room full of scouts and the GM and Lawrence
Yeah.
McCutcheon, player personnel director, and I'm like, holy smokes. And he's like, "What did you think?" And I just told him, I said, "I think he's this, I think he's that, I think he's boom, 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 boom." And he was like, "All right, thanks." And I stepped out the room, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I have no
Did
idea
it work? Yeah.
what anybody thought what I said, but there was a scout, Dick Daniels, who's been one of my mentors for a long time, and I remember he came out and he told me, he said, "Brad, you did a really good
Yeah.
job," and he was the one that really taught me how to construct a scouting report and how to kind of write a
I'm
player and all
picturing it,
that. And
man. You're a
so,
young kid. You come in like, give me your thoughts on Roscoe Parrish. Go. And you're like,
no, it was intimidating, man, and you just had to be ready for that
but guess
moment.
what?
But it was just being
Those
yourself.
PR skills, the enterprise, front facing, salesman skills, all of it comes into play because guess what? You're
Absolutely,
presenting.
absolutely, absolutely. It's almost like another one of my favorite movies is The Karate
Yeah.
Kid,
Great film.
and the scene of when he's complaining about, "You're not teaching me any karate." Like, I thought I was supposed to be doing karate,
Yeah.
and he's like, "No, wax on, wax off, paint the house." Like, he's doing this, and he's like, "No, like, do you get it now? Like, you've been learning it this whole time. You're just now it's showing." So, but yeah, you're right. Like, all those skills just bode well. But as a young kid, you don't realize that at the time. So, after I got done with that draft, I believe that's when we drafted Steven Jackson in
Great.
the first round. I'll never forget that. And then Charlie, he hired me on as a full time scouting assistant, and I did that for like 3 years, and was just picking players up from the airport, just a lot of just going to the combine, not watching players, just grabbing lunch for the GM, between workouts and stuff like that, and keep doing profile tapes and just the normal scouting assistant duties, and did that for 3 years. And then that's when I became a combine scout, an NFS combine
Yeah.
scout. And that, to me, that's the best training that you can get from a scout, because you're always working on the next
Yeah.
year's draft class. And so, so say it's the '05 draft, and that March and April, or February, March, April, whatever, like that '05 draft, well, you're working on the
Oh, six
'06
guys.
draft. And so what I think is the best training is I'll never forget my first junior day. I was had to go to the University of Missouri, and I met the pro liaison, and he just gives me a list, and he was like, "Here's a
Here's our
list,"
guys.
and he walks me into the film room. I don't know anything about him, and I just had to sort out that whole roster. Like, I don't know what anybody is. I don't know how good
Yeah.
anybody is, and I remember I just grinded like all
Yeah, and
night,
some of them could be
and
Justin Smith, first round pick, or it could be a guy that has no chance of being drafted, but you've got to do it.
yeah, you don't know, and you don't know until you watch them, and that's why I tell our scouts all the time. Like, you're like, well, all these free agents and all these guys that are undrafted guys, and I'm like, well, you don't know if they're free agents or
Yeah,
undrafted guys unless you look
got
at
to.
them. So, but that moment right there kind of showed me like, look, and going through that whole spring, it's like it kind of gave me the whole thing of don't worry about what anybody else thinks. Like, just trust what your
I
eyes
love that.
see, and that's all. I mean, that's kind of a hard thing to kind of
Yeah, you have the real
grasp,
conviction.
especially as a young scout, because you got a lot of noise that affects you, and you got groupthink and all this stuff that affects you. And just like we were talking about earlier about the mock draft stuff, you want to be
Yep.
right, and so it takes a very special skill to be able to say, look, I don't care what anybody else thinks. This is what my but being a combine scout forces you to be in that moment of like you're writing all these players for the next year's draft class, and there is no mock drafts out. There is nobody's talking
And
about those
nothing should
players.
change from the combine to the draft, and yet you hear this guy's rising up a board, but it's like that's the group think where it's like, well, maybe we have to take another look at this
Yes,
guy.
exactly. And so I've always been big on the psychological part of the draft process, and still am. And so, but those are the one of the things of the group think. It's a very or just the whole conformity. Always look at the Solomon Ash conformity experiment
Okay.
that you look at on YouTube, and it's all those guys in a room, and they're looking at
Yep.
these lines on this paper, and it's this guy that's they say all the wrong lines, and then the guy knows that he has the right answer, but
Still
he
says it.
keeps hearing something else, and you're just like, oh shoot, it's got to be three, but everybody's saying two, so I guess I'm gonna say two. But in your heart, you know that no, it was three. It's not. It's not two. And so those are the things that that I'm always big on and try to eliminate that group thinking, try to cut out that outside noise. But I think that being a combine scout really helped me out with that. And you just kind of get training in all aspects of scouting, of running a pro day and having your own conviction and all that stuff. So doing that, for I did the Midwest and cross checked the Southeast, and after that, I finally got an area job doing the Northeast, and we had a new regime come in. Billy Devaney became our general manager, and he gave me a Northeast area scout job,
Great.
and then the rest is history.
Fast forwarding to you're rising up the chart with the Rams. Go 2013 rolls around. This kid out of Pittsburgh is a defensive tackle. What was your initial thoughts and feelings on Aaron Donald, the prospect?
Yeah. So Aaron Donald, he's another great study in terms of blocking out the outside noise, and because at the time we had, I think we had Michael Brockers and Kendall Langford, and we had already drafted Chris Long, so we had these big
Yeah,
defensive linemen at the time, and I go into Pitt, and I'm like, this guy's amazing, but I'm like, the coaches are gonna hate him because he's not big.
yeah,
And I'm like, and then so now you're battling
sure.
like,
Going in.
how how high of a grade do I give him? Because if I give this guy this high of a grade, but the coach is gonna be like, well, what are you talking about? This guy's only 6 foot and 285. So, but I'll never forget, and this is what I always say to this day: the intangibles are the separators of success. Is that I knew the defensive coordinator at Pitt at the time, Matt
Okay.
House, because he was working with Spagnola in that previous staff under Spags. And so I go into Pitt and I see Matt, And Matt tells me, "Hey, Brad, are you staying for practice?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah." He said, "Come out about a half hour early." And he didn't tell me why. He just told me to come out half. So I'm thinking, as a scout, I'm like, "Oh, he's going to give me some more background information, some more intel. He'll be out of practice early." So he didn't tell me that. He just told me to come out practice early. So I come out to practice early. You know, they practice in that bubble that the
Yeah,
Steelers
yeah, they
that they
share
share
it.
with the
Yeah.
Steelers. And so I go out there and I walk out to the bubble, and it's the ball boys, the equipment managers, the specialists, the kickers, the punter, the long snapper, and Aaron Donald. Those are the only
Huh.
people in the bubble. And Aaron Donald is sitting on this bag, fully taped up with this twitch in his knee, as if like, man, I've been
Get
waiting
me
on this
going.
all day. Like, where's everybody at? Because I've been waiting on this all day. And so then I see Matt House. He comes out with all the coaches, and Matt goes, "Brad, you come out early?" I was like, "Yep." And he goes, "Did you see it?" And I said,
Did you
"Yep."
see it? I
And it
love
was like,
that. Like, okay,
I was
that's
like,
it.
nothing else needed to be said. I was like, that's it. That's it. So yeah, Aaron Donald, I mean, a very talented player, very explosive, very strong. I mean, all that, very athletic. I mean, he had this rare combine, but it's his work ethic
Oh,
and
I love this.
intangibles and his passion for football that a lot of people just don't. I mean, they know now, but at the time, like, and that was my story that I told, you know, Les Snead and Jeff Fisher. Like, I'm like, that said it all to me. Is that when Matt House told me to come out there early, and sure
When he
enough,
starts
he's
slipping in the
always been that
draft,
way.
are you in the war room like, hey guys, Scott, or is it understood like, hey, if he's there, we're taking him?
Yeah, it was pretty understood. You know, we had two picks that year, so you know, we took Greg
Yep.
Robinson two of
But isn't that the
and then
draft in
we
a
followed it
nutshell?
up with. But you know what? That was the premium position. That was the talented. You know what I mean? Like that's
And
what
guess
it
what?
was.
Every
So
mock draft had Robinson going first or second.
there's no doubt it was him or Sammy
Yep.
Watkins that I think we were targeting, and then finally we just kind of settled in on Greg Robinson. But that was a great draft.
Yeah.
I mean that was I mean after that it was so. Then after that, when we got to that next pick, it's like now you got Aaron Donald, you got you know Mike Evans, you got Zach Martin. It's just you have so many. Like that was
Odell.
a great draft. Yeah, Odell
Yeah.
Beckham. I mean, C.J. Mosley. Like you got all these great players, and so but you know the sights were set on Aaron Donald. I never forget when we got to that pick and a team called and they offered a pretty enticing trade
Yeah.
offer. And I remember Jeff and Les was like, absolutely
Good.
not. We're picking this guy, and that's just it. And I'll never forget in that draft meeting, our assistant general manager, Ray
Mm-hmm.
Agnew, he was the one that really, like, in that draft meeting leading up to that draft, because a lot of people were saying because of the size, you know, he was going to be a sub
Sure.
rush, you know,
Package guy. Yeah.
specialized kind of package nickel sub rush guy. And I never forget Ragnar was like, no, 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 no. He's every
Oh
down.
yeah.
Like it is no, it's no specialized nothing. And like he said it with the most passion. And you know, Ray Agnew, you know, top
Legendary.
10 pick,
Yeah.
defensive lineman. Like he's like when you hear Ray Agnew, and Ray Agnew's a pretty soft spoken guy, but when he hit said, I was like,
Hey,
okay,
I remember
this is
they
real.
play. You guys played Tampa, and it was a thunderstorm. And I remember, I don't know who the D coordinator was at the time. It was probably Greg Williams. They were lining Aaron up at outside linebacker in a 3-4, and I was like, I've never
Yes,
seen this before. And it was in a rainstorm,
yes.
and he was just out there sacking quarterbacks from the OLB position.
He has rare. I mean, if you look back at his combine, he had shuttle times. Like he had DB shuttle times,
Yeah.
but he had like 30 reps at 225 and ran a 4.6. And because of the way he's built, and he's still got long arms, and he's so explosive. But again, like he's talented. And I tell the story all the time about Aaron Donald, and I say it about Cooper Cup as
Yeah.
well. And it's like, man, like this guy loves
Isn't that the
football and
common
he
denominator with all
works
these guys?
so hard. Like, because that time where he was the first one in that bubble in practice, He's been
Yeah,
that
didn't
way
change.
every single day. He's the first one out at practice every day. And I'll never forget, even his rookie year before he was even starting. I never forget. I had to run to the facility real quick. It was a Saturday night, and I think I was heading out on the road somewhere the next day, and so I run to the facility, grab stuff, and it's Aaron Donald, and he was in the world. Because I was like, "There's no players
Yeah.
here." It's like 8, 9 o'clock at night. It's Aaron Donald in the whirlpool,
Damn.
watching his iPad.
Damn.
Like
That gets me.
he's not even the starter. He's not even the starter, but he's preparing like he's the starter as a rookie. And it was the same way with Cooper Kupp when we
Yeah.
drafted him, and that's when it hit me. I'm like, look, man, if these players don't have the intangibles and the passion and the work ethic and the football character, it's not going to work.
All right.
That's just the bottom
I
line.
love this stuff. We're gonna do rapid fire, and then we're gonna wrap this up. We haven't even gotten into some of the Lions stuff. I want to talk about Jared Goff. That'll be another time.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go
yeah.
rapid fire, and you just give me some answers, and we go from there. Your greatest mentor as a football professional, not in life, but as a football person in your career. Who was the person that kind of you look to and say, "This guy showed me the ropes"?
And I'd have to say Dick Daniels.
Okay.
I'd have to
I don't
say
know. I
Dick
don't know that
Daniels.
name, so
Yeah.
tell me who he is.
Yeah, so Dick Daniels, he was our Northeast scout at the time when I first joined the scouting department as a scouting intern, and he's the one that kind of took the time out to. That's the guy that told me good job
Yep.
after I went in that dark
Yeah.
room and spilled my guts about this player on this profile tape I made, and he just kind of told me like, hey, look, man, like this is what you got to do. This is how you do it, and we went to this college all-star game called the Cactus Bowl. It
Okay.
was like this small school college all-star game down in Texas. This is back when they used to like run 40-yard dash and stuff at all-star games. And I remember it was just me and him. And every morning before we went out to practice, we would sit in that lobby and he would just tell me just all the ins and outs of roster building, team building. I mean, like he was that guy, and he had been in the league for 30 years, damn near, and he just would just give me so much knowledge and intel. So there's a
I like
lot of
that.
guys. That's
I
why
like
it's
that.
like I kind of was stumped because there's a lot
That's
of guys
good.
I can name. I can name Lawrence McCutcheon. I can name
I
Les
love it.
Snead. But from the very get go, I'd have to say Big Dan.
Who is the player that you remember being most convicted about and using your voice the loudest, and maybe if you want to say pounding the table to be selected in any draft, any team you've been a part of?
Hmm.
It could be a late round guy who you're like, hey, let's take a shot on this guy. It could be a first round pick. Someone that you were like, this is my dude. And I remember asking Jason Light about this, and he was like, in Philly, Trent Cole was my guy. Like you just have this random guy. You're like, that's my guy.
For me, it was John Johnson,
The safety out of
the
BC.
safety out
Oh,
of
talk about it. I
BC.
love this.
So it was funny that draft. I remember it was like that's when we first hired Sean McVay, and we had a lot of new coaches, and Les was in that whole hiring process. So Les, he usually is like deep diving everything all the time. He didn't have that kind of
No,
time
he's
because we're doing
interviewing
this
Doug Marrone and
whole
11 other guys.
his
Yeah.
whole regime makeover. And so I'll never forget. We get into the third round, and you get to those points in the draft where the board just looks kind of foggy. Like no one's really standing
Just
out. No one's
names.
really it's just kind of just static. It's staying, and everybody's just kind of staring at it. And everybody's throwing names, and I was just like John Johnson. I said, let's just pick John Johnson. And I never forget Wade Phillips. He looks over at me and he was like, John Johnson. I said, I'm telling you, this guy's a starter. Like
Yes.
he's a starter. And so Wade Phillips, I love Wade Phillips. He's just like, oh, if he's a starter, then
I trust you. Let's go.
And so I just kept pounding the table for John Johnson. I said, I'm telling you, John Johnson. Like, because I remember I went out to BC UConn game, saw him live. Like, I just love what I
Yeah.
saw out of him. like another guy just high intangibles, high work ethic. I actually thought he was going to be more of a coverage
Sure.
player, and then he actually transformed himself into more of a box kind of player. But I'll never forget. I just that was the moment I think that I felt like I had just like a voice, and I think it was a needed voice because like everybody was
Yeah.
new. Like you had a whole new coaching staff. We did just a lot of change and makeover there, and I never forget. I
Full
just had a
circle
lot of
moment.
conviction.
You're in New Orleans,
Yeah.
NFC Championship game a few years later. Who makes the biggest play of the game?
Oh, well, you could say a lot of guys did, but I actually think Jared Goff played one of his
You
best
did, but I'm
games
saying
ever.
John Johnson makes the big
But
pick at the end.
John Johnson made the big pick
Yeah.
at the end, though. Yes,
That Goff was awesome in that
absolutely.
game. Everyone and I've worked with Sean Payton this past year, and he's still sensitive about it because obviously the non-call on the Nicole Roby Coleman thing. But I always say to him,
No doubt.
"You're up 13-0 at home. You got the ball first in overtime. You got to close the door." But Jared Goff that day would not quit, and some of those big
It
third
was
down
just so
conversions.
loud,
Oh,
man. Like what people don't realize about that game, it was the loudest thing ever. And it's like he couldn't hear. His headset went off. He's busting his ass to try to run to the receiver before the play clock ended to tell him to sit like that. It wasn't just about his stats, about him throwing. It was about the adversity he came through. But it's funny you say that about Sean Payton because I talked to Dan about that game,
oh, because Dan's on
and
the
this is
staff for the
when me and
Saints.
Dan first
Sure.
started working together. Yeah, and Dan, like me and Dan we're so much like the same person. Dan, he never said anything about that call
Yeah.
was no, he was like, no, we shouldn't have put ourselves in position to actually get to the what I
Yeah.
mean, like we're all about accountability. Like that's just reigns so much in our building. And Dan was like, no, man, we shouldn't have put ourselves in a position to actually give y'all an opportunity to do that. You know what I mean? So, you gotta love Dan's response on that. It's just like that's such a Dan Campbell
Were you at
response.
Jared Goff's pro day at Cal? Were you there that day?
No, I wasn't
They
at the pro
speak
day.
they speak in legendary. Like, I mean, I think Mike Silva wrote a beautiful piece on it when it happened. But like the Rams, whatever it was, private workout or a pro day, but it was
It was private. It
whipping
was private. It
rain,
was
and he's
raining.
just,
It was raining. Yeah.
yeah,
We actually purposely didn't really send people out to his pro
kind
day
of lay
because we
low.
kind of knew we were going to we kind of wanted to keep it close to the vest. But no, I remember the private workout, and I wasn't there,
Yeah,
but I know Les, Jeff, all those guys were there,
it
and
was done
you just heard it was just like, man, like because I think they did him and Carson Wentz like
on the
back to
same trip, I
back,
think. Yeah,
and I guess it was all good for Carson Wentz in terms of
yeah,
the weather and the conditions, but Jared and I think we kind of gave Jared a choice to move the
and he was like, "Nah,
location,
let's go."
and he was like, "Nah,
I like
nah,
that.
let's go." And he was out there just whipping it, man, and he's extremely talented, and I'm so happy for
Me
him.
too.
Just kind of
I've been with.
just
I mean, I've
I'm
been
it's
covering
just
Jared since he got in, but like for you, it's a personal connection where you draft him in LA, then you yourself get this job in Detroit, and the first big move you make is you trade their franchise quarterback, and it almost felt like it was a throw-in. Like, yeah, we'll give you Goff too, but
right.
here's Jared Goff last year as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC.
Well, I remember when we were hammering out the details of the trade. I mean, because it was kind of that carousel of available quarterbacks that
Mm-hmm.
year in terms of like who was going to be available. So obviously, Stafford was getting traded to the Rams, but I never forget Les asked me. He was like, "Do you want Jared in this trade?" And I was like, "Hell
Yeah,
yeah! Like absolutely!" Like it wasn't like just give me any quarterback. No, I was like, no, I want Jared in this trade. And the reason why I'm so proud of him and I'm so happy for him is because that first year, man, like, look, it was almost like the guy as a starter in LA, like 4 out of 5 years, he's in the
playoffs.
postseason, if not Super Bowl. And so it's
He won
like,
a game in
you're like,
Seattle
all
in the
right. And
playoffs with
then
like one
I think
hand.
2019 was
Yeah.
like the 1 year that he did. But then, yeah, so like we make the trade and the way that the narrative was of how the trade went, it kind of went like, oh, but Jared Goff can't play. And I'm like, dude, this guy was just in the divisional playing with a broken
Yeah.
hand, completing 70% of his passes. Like, why can't he play anymore? So then we start the season, and me and Dan, we tear the roster
Yeah.
down to the studs. I mean, literally, the only thing we really had was an offensive
Mm-hmm.
line. And even all of those guys got hurt. I mean, besides Penei Sewell, all those guys are beat up. So we really didn't have much in the skill player department. We didn't really, I mean, we had a beat up offensive line. We didn't really have any weapons around them to throw to. Like, we thought that we didn't have any money to play with in free agency, really. So we kind of had to play the comp formula. And then we got Tyrell Williams and Rashad
Yeah.
Perriman as
Veteran
like the
guys, just
top.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we have those guys. And then Tyrell Williams kind of gets hurt. He's not there. We cut
Yeah.
Rashad Perriman. So now we have like this rookie,
A
Amon St.
fourth
Brown,
round
and
pick.
that's it. And so and then we kind of claim, but everything that he went through that year. I mean, you got to think Detroit. You're talking about a football town. Like, this is a fan base that is unlike anything I've ever experienced. Like, this fan base, they care about their football. I mean, it's legit. I absolutely love them. But they were mad at Jared. I mean, he was getting the boos and all that. And I'm like, all right, we don't have any weapons for this guy. Offensive line is beat up. We had to make a mid-season offensive coordinator change.
Yep.
Dan's calling plays for the first time. Actually did a really good job at it. But and I'm like, what quarterback would be successful going through that kind of situation? Like, I don't know what quarterback would be successful. Like,
Can I tell you something also?
quarterback
Can I tell you another thing? Jared
doesn't have any weapons, doesn't have an offensive line, didn't have an OC.
Do you know what got my respect for him? The toughness and all that's great, and that's quarterbacks. Didn't say a peep.
Yeah.
Didn't say a peep. Didn't moan. Didn't speak negatively about McVay once, even though there was rumors out there that like, oh yeah, McVay couldn't win with him. Just kind of put his head down, went to work. Okay, I'm a quarterback. Let's go. And I know he's a number one pick, and he makes a lot of money, and everyone says, well, that's what he's supposed to. It's a lot easier said than done.
Absolutely. And that's I've always said about, like you said, like the toughness. Yeah, it's a quarterback. You got to have that. But the mental, and I've always respected Jared's mental toughness. Like, that's one trait of him that I think kind of goes under the radar a little bit. But he has like top level elite mental toughness, because I've seen a lot of things that he's been through. Like, I'm talking about that NFC Championship game versus New Orleans. Like, people don't talk about like the noise that he had to deal with and all that stuff. But he goes through that 21 season and he does not complain. He does not about this and that and that. He just goes through it. And it starts coming together late in the season. And then, he has a year that he had last year. And now it's like, oh, Jared Goff's good. And I'm like, well, he's actually always been good. But everybody, like I talk about the psychology of the process, it's the recency bias. And it's like, oh, well, the last thing we saw is Jared Goff got casted off, so he can't play anymore. And the last thing we saw is him in 2021, so he can't play anymore, right? Like, I'm like, no, he can play. So when he had the season he had last year, I think a lot of people were like, oh, Jared Goff, and I'm like, no, he's always been a good quarterback. He's always been uber talented. He's always had those traits to excel a football team. And so, again, I'm just super happy for him. But like what you're saying about him not complaining, him not, saying this or that, like, that's what makes him.
It's pretty cool.
He's a Detroit Lion. Like, he's that. Like, he's embodied what the city's about. And I think the toughness and everything that he's endured, and I think everybody just has a lot more appreciation about him. And again, I think we'll be even better offensively this year coming up. And I'm just excited about him.
All right, we've been on for over an hour. We're gonna wrap it here. One last.
Have we?
It's been amazing. I could honestly do an audio book with you for 6 hours. I'm loving this. Like, I want to talk about Tavon Austin. I want to talk about Stedman Bailey. I want to go deep. I want to go deep, dude. I want to talk about what.
That was another one of those drafts, though, man. Like, that 2013 draft, man.
I know. I want to talk Kirby Joseph for the next hour with you. Let's wrap it with this. Lions fans listening, this is the first time in 2 decades, I'd say, that they actually have a little pep in their step, and there's some national media attention saying the Lions could be the team. I know you're excited with what you've built. What would be your message to Lions fans as we head towards the start of training camp?
Just continue to stick with us and just continue to know that we're not done yet. And just know that we're always going to work hard, keep our pedal to the metal. We're always going to stay aggressive. I love the fact that it's a lot of this, what they call buzz and hope. And I think this fan base and our city deserves that, just through all that they've been through. But at the end of the day, me and Dan know that we haven't made the playoffs yet, and so that's what has to be. We got to get in the dance, and we have full faith and optimism that I think we have the right structure in place, that we can get that done. But we got to go out there and prove it, and that's how we're wired. We're all about accountability and earning it and do it the right way, and that's what the city of Detroit is. It's roll up your sleeves, get it done, no excuses, and just know that that your football team is doing the exact same thing. And I think it's a lot of reasons for the optimism and excitement, but I do think that all bearing healthy and all that, I do think that the fans will be really excited. And first game we'll see, man.
Thursday night kickoff. Let's go.
Absolutely.
Brad Holmes, this was awesome. Honestly, I feel like we should do a weekly hour-long show.
Oh, this is awesome. I didn't even know it was an hour. I was like, we had an hour.
Throughout the clocks.
Cool.
I love talking to you. I think you're great at what you do.
It's been a good conversation.
But I really honestly think you've got great perspective, not only on football, but on life. And it's cool, your path, man. I didn't know the enterprise rent-a-car stuff, but it makes a lot of sense to me. As well-rounded a guy as you'll meet in the NFL, I love you coming on. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks a lot, Schrager. You do it the right way, man. I got a lot of respect for what you do, man, and you make football fun, man.
Hey, I had Jack Campbell in my top 10, just so you know. That's it. No, I didn't.
I'm sure.
Brad Holmes, everybody. That was awesome. Thanks, Brad.
All right, Chief. Later, man.